March 30th, 1998. Florida State Prison. The heavy door to the execution chamber creaked open. It sounded almost deafening in the thick silence. Judy Buenoano was led in, her face a mask of calm. She walked with steady steps, each one taking her closer to the electric chair, her final destination. At that moment, there were no theatrics, no cries for mercy. The woman who had been dubbed the Black Widow by the press seemed almost serene. There was no outward sign of fear, no last-minute regrets, just the inevitability of it all. This was the final chapter in a life defined by manipulation, deception, and murder. Judy Buenoano's story had been one of darkness, starting long before she became a convicted killer. Born Judias Welty in 1943 in Quanah, Texas, her early years were marked by hardship and abuse. At the age of 4, her mother died, and Judy was sent to live with her grandparents. But that wasn't the end of her struggles. She was moved again when her father remarried, and the new home she found herself in was anything but safe. She was allegedly starved and abused by her father and stepmother, leading her to lash out violently. By the time Judy was 14, she had already been incarcerated for attacking her family with hot grease. But even behind bars, her story wasn't over. She was released, only to follow a path that would ultimately lead her to kill. But how did she get here? How did a woman, seemingly trapped by her circumstances, turn into one of Florida's most notorious serial killers? And what was it that finally brought her to the execution chamber, ready to face the consequences of her cold, calculated crimes? Her crimes weren't sudden. They were years in the making. Each death, each murder, was part of a sickening pattern, a need for money and control. Her first husband, James Goodyear, was poisoned in 1971. His death initially dismissed as natural causes. But that was only the beginning. Over the next decade, she would claim more victims, using arsenic to poison those closest to her. First, a boyfriend, then her own son, Michael. Each death was an opportunity for her to collect life insurance money, the financial reward for the lives she had stolen. As the clock ticked down to her final moments, Judy Buenoano's calm demeanor betrayed nothing of the woman she had been, the woman who had manipulated, killed, and left a trail of broken lives behind her. What had truly driven her to kill? Was she simply a product of a broken childhood and a series of bad choices, or was she a cold-blooded killer, manipulating everyone around her for her own gain? The answer lay in the lives she had destroyed, lives that would never be the same. And now, as Judy prepared to meet her end, the question remained: was her death the justice her victims deserved, or had the system failed them long before? It all began with a life insurance policy, seemingly innocent, but ultimately deadly. Judy Buenoano's criminal path wasn't an overnight transformation. It was a slow, methodical rise to darkness, driven by her insatiable need for control and money. And it was only the beginning. In 1971, Judy married James Goodyear, a sergeant in the U.S. Air Force. They settled in Orlando, Florida, but their marriage wasn't as blissful as it seemed. What appeared to be a normal relationship would soon become the first of her calculated, deadly acts. James Goodyear died suddenly on September 16, 1971, under mysterious circumstances. Initially, his death was ruled as natural causes, heart failure, they said. But Judy's cold, calculating plan had already begun to unfold. By the time authorities began asking questions, it was too late. There was no clear evidence, no obvious red flags, and Judy quickly moved on. She collected a life insurance payout for his death, her first in a long line of insurance frauds. But as years passed, the pattern would become undeniable. In 1978, she moved to Colorado and began living with her next victim, Bobby Joe Morris. He too would fall victim to her dark ambitions. Bobby Joe, once in good health, suddenly fell ill, showing symptoms of poisoning. His death was ruled as a natural cause at first, but in the weeks leading up to his death, Judy's behavior raised suspicion. Friends began to notice that she was overly concerned with his life insurance policy. Soon after his death, she again received a payout, but this time the authorities were watching more closely. Yet, once again, they were unable to connect her to the crime. By 1980, Judy had begun to see her own son, Michael, as an obstacle to the life she wanted. Michael had been born out of wedlock, and Judy resented him throughout his life. Michael's sudden and unexplained illness, paraplegia, only fueled Judy's growing impatience. By May 13, 1980, Judy took Michael out on a canoe trip in Milton, Florida. The canoe capsized, and Michael, weighed down by his leg and arm braces, drowned in the water. His death was ruled an accident. But Judy didn't miss a beat. She immediately collected the life insurance payout. It was a tragedy masked as an unfortunate accident. But Michael's death was just one more piece in a horrific puzzle, a puzzle that was slowly being pieced together as Judy's web of lies and manipulation grew tighter. Each of her victims, each life lost, had been a step toward financial freedom in her eyes. But to everyone else, they were nothing more than names on a death certificate. But by the time of Michael's death, Judy had already begun to slip. Her pattern was becoming too clear, and the walls were closing in. Soon, she would meet her next victim, John Gentry, and her deadly habits would finally catch up with her. What made her kill? Was it the power, the money, or something darker buried within her? The pieces were coming together, and Judy's carefully constructed world was beginning to crumble. It wasn't just a string of coincidences. Judy Buenoano's victims, her husband, her boyfriend, her son, were beginning to reveal a deadly pattern, and the authorities were starting to take notice. For years, Judy had evaded suspicion, her manipulative charm masking the darkness beneath. But after Michael's death in 1980, something started to shift. John Gentry, a wallpaper businessman in Pensacola, Florida, would become her next target. They had been dating for a while, and Judy seemed to have found another man to control. But this time, something went terribly wrong for Judy. On November 1982, a car explosion left Gentry severely injured. He survived. But his near-death experience wasn't what caught the investigators' attention. It was the growing number of inconsistencies in Judy's story. Judy had claimed that Gentry had a terminal illness, something that couldn't be corroborated. Her actions during his recovery raised eyebrows. He'd been taking what she had called vitamin pills, but they didn't sit right with his doctors. Tests on those pills revealed something far more sinister: arsenic and paraformaldehyde. The pieces of Judy's horrifying puzzle were beginning to fall into place. When Gentry's doctors reported the suspicious nature of his illness and recovery, the police began digging into her past. What they uncovered was chilling. Investigators revisited the deaths of James Goodyear, Bobby Joe Morris, and Michael Buenoano. With fresh eyes and new evidence, the authorities exhumed the bodies of her previous victims. What they found confirmed their worst fears: arsenic poisoning. James Goodyear and Bobby Joe Morris had both been murdered by the very woman who had once promised them love and companionship. They had been poisoned slowly, methodically, with the same deadly toxin that had killed her son. Judy had been using life insurance as her weapon of choice. With each death, she had raked in substantial payouts, her greed driving her actions. But now, the authorities had the evidence they needed. Judy Buenoano was arrested in January 1984. Her past was no longer just a history of suspicion and rumor. It was now a trail of blood. The woman who had once seemed so innocent, so composed, was unmasked as a serial killer who had played a deadly game with the lives of those she claimed to love. The investigation didn't stop at Gentry's near murder. They also linked her to the 1974 death in Alabama, and even began to examine the 1980 death of another boyfriend, Gerald Dossett. Authorities were relentless. They dug deep, connecting the dots between her victims. All the while, Judy maintained her innocence, claiming that she had never harmed anyone. But for the families of the victims, the truth was undeniable. Judy's pattern of death, manipulation, and fraud had finally caught up with her. The game was over. If you're finding this story as chilling as we are, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more true crime stories. Stay tuned for what happens next. Judy's trial, the shocking twists, and the final reckoning. Judy's trial. Judy Buenoano's trial in 1984 was a spectacle that captivated the nation. A chilling case that seemed to leave no doubt about her guilt. After years of evading justice, the truth about her crimes had finally come to light. As the courtroom doors swung open, Judy walked in, seemingly calm, almost detached. But this time, there would be no manipulating the system. No more false smiles or pleas of innocence. The evidence was damning. The prosecution laid out the case in grim detail, carefully presenting the evidence that linked Judy to the deaths of James Goodyear, Bobby Joe Morris, and Michael Buenoano. They spoke of the arsenic found in the bodies of her victims, the life insurance policies she had collected after each death, and the pattern that had become unmistakable. One by one, the pieces fell into place, showing a woman who had, over the course of a decade, poisoned those closest to her for the sole purpose of financial gain. The defense, of course, tried to paint a different picture. Judy's lawyers argued that she had been a victim of a harsh upbringing and a life of misfortune. They claimed that her actions were the result of years of trauma, the result of a woman who had never received the help she needed. But no amount of sympathy could obscure the cold reality of her crimes. As the defense tried to humanize her, the prosecution showed the jury the truth. Judy had systematically killed her family and partners, using poison as her weapon and life insurance as her prize. The emotional toll on the victims' families was palpable. For the family of Michael Buenoano, especially, Judy's betrayal cut the deepest. To them, she wasn't just a mother who lost her way. She was a cold-blooded killer who took the life of her own son to secure her next payday. After days of testimony, the jury deliberated. When they returned, the verdict was swift and undeniable. Guilty. Judy Buenoano was convicted of the first-degree murder of her son, Michael, and the attempted murder of John Gentry. She was also convicted of the murder of her first husband, James Goodyear. In a crime that had spanned years and left a trail of shattered lives, Judy was sentenced to death. The judge didn't mince words. This was a woman who had killed not just for money, but for the thrill of it. But Judy's response was chilling. She maintained her innocence. Even as she was led away in handcuffs, she still claimed she had been framed, that the system had failed her. To the end, she seemed to believe that somehow she had been wronged. For the victims' families, the trial brought a bitter sense of justice, but it didn't bring their loved ones back. No amount of legal victory could undo the devastation Judy had caused. But was the death sentence the right choice? Was it truly justice, or just the final chapter in a tragic story of a woman who was never held accountable for the pain she caused until it was too late? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to keep following this gripping case. The conclusion is coming up. What happens next will leave you shocked. March 30th, 1998, Florida State Prison. The heavy door to the execution chamber opened one final time. Judy Buenoano was led in, her face stoic, her expression unreadable. She had fought for years, maintained her innocence, and attempted to manipulate the system every step of the way. But now, there was no escaping the inevitable. This was it. The final reckoning. Judy was about to make history. She was the first woman to be executed in Florida since 1848, and the first woman in the United States to be electrocuted since 1957. For decades, she had evaded justice, but the time had come for the justice system to finally deliver. But as the restraints were tightened and the cold metal of the electric chair surrounded her, Judy's calm demeanor never wavered. She was eerily composed, almost detached from the gravity of the moment. When asked if she had any final words, she answered simply, No, sir. It was a chilling, indifferent response to the atrocities she had committed. A woman who had poisoned her family. A mother who had taken the life of her own son. A woman who had stolen the lives of those she claimed to love. Her final words, just 2 syllables, could have spoken volumes about the coldness and apathy that defined her life. At 6:37 p.m., Judy Buenoano was pronounced dead, the lethal current surging through her body and ending her life in a matter of seconds. The families of her victims had waited for this moment for years, but no amount of finality could bring their loved ones back. For them, it wasn't the end of a story. It was the painful reminder of a life stolen by a woman who had thought nothing of the consequences of her actions. In the aftermath, questions lingered. Was Judy's execution truly the justice her victims deserved, or was it simply the system closing the door on a life that had long since spiraled out of control? She was the first woman executed in Florida in over a century, but her execution also highlighted the deeper issues that plagued the justice system. Judy had been allowed to slip through the cracks for years, her crimes dismissed until it was too late. Could she have been stopped earlier? Could the system have done more to prevent the deaths of her victims? Judy's story is one of tragedy, manipulation, and the long-lasting effects of greed. It's a story that forces us to ask difficult questions about justice, accountability, and the choices we make in life. In the end, did Judy pay for her crimes? Or was her execution just another chapter in a broken system, one that is often slow to act, but quick to deliver its final judgment? Her last meal consisted of steamed broccoli, asparagus, strawberries, and tomato wedges with hot tea and lemon, a modest request that felt almost out of place given the magnitude of her crimes. But for Judy, perhaps this was the last bit of control she could seize before the inevitable end. As the prison guards prepared to cremate her body, the final chapter in Judy Buenoano's life came to a close. But for those who knew her victims, her death didn't erase the pain. It didn't bring their loved ones back. The scars she left behind would never fade, no matter how final the punishment. What do you think? Was Judy Buenoano's execution the justice she deserved? Or was it just the tragic end of a woman who should have been stopped much earlier? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more gripping true crime stories. This is just one of many cases that raise the tough questions about justice, morality, and the true cost of crime.